For 40 years, 4 entire decades, Indonesia's criminal justice system has been playing by the same rulebook. But that is all about to change. The country has just kicked off a massive overhaul of its criminal procedure law. We're talking a complete reboot, 40 years in the making. So let's dive in and break down what this legal revolution really means.
So, get this. The old law was put on the books way back in 1981. The new one? It won't fully kick in until 2026. And that huge gap in time, that's exactly why this reform is such a big deal. It's basically a leap from one era to a completely different one, all designed to drag the country's legal system into the 21st century.
All right, so let's set the scene here. This new law, which folks are calling the new KUHAP, is replacing a legal framework that's been around since the early 80s. The goal here is to fundamentally shake up how criminal law is actually enforced across the entire country.
At its heart, the whole point of this is really twofold. First, to modernize a set of rules that were just getting, frankly, pretty outdated for our complex world. And second, to give law enforcement better, clearer tools to do their jobs right. It's a huge ambition, and believe me, it comes with some pretty massive changes. So let's start with one of the biggest, most talked about changes, and this one is aimed squarely at corporations. It's a brand new idea for Indonesia called a Deferred Prosecution Agreement, or DPA for short.
Okay, so what in the world is a DPA? Well, the easiest way to think about it is like a probation period for a company. It's an off-ramp, so instead of going through a super risky, full-blown trial, a corporation can strike a deal with prosecutors to fix the problem by meeting a set of really strict conditions.
And the process for this is very structured. It's not just a handshake deal. First, the company has to ask for it. Then, they sit down and negotiate the terms with the prosecutor. And here's a really crucial check and balance. A court has to review and officially sign off on the whole thing. Once that's done, the company has a set amount of time to do everything they promised. If they pull it off, the case gets dropped. And make no mistake, these conditions are tough. This is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. A company could be forced to pay compensation to victims, build out brand new anti-corruption programs from scratch, and actively cooperate with prosecutors on other cases. It's a way out, sure, but it's one that demands real, meaningful change.
So, that's the new setup for corporations. But what about for individuals? Well, the new KUHAP is bringing in another major concept that, might sound familiar to a lot of us, but is totally new for Indonesia, the plea bargain.
So the key thing to understand here is that this is a formal deal. A defendant, working with their lawyer, can agree to plead guilty and cooperate, and in exchange for that, they could get reduced charges or maybe a lighter sentence. Now, this is a pretty powerful tool for getting through cases more efficiently, but it definitely raises a big question. Can just any defendant ask for a plea bargain? And the answer is a clear no. The law puts some pretty strict limits on this. To even be eligible, you have to be a first-time offender. The crime itself can't carry a maximum penalty of more than 5 years. And finally, the defendant has to agree to pay back any restitution or damages to the victims. Now, these new deals are just one piece of the puzzle. The new law also tries to fundamentally rebalance the power of law enforcement with brand new protections for citizens' rights. And that, as you can imagine, is a very delicate balancing act. On the law enforcement side, there's now a single, unified set of rules for blocking assets. Before, the rules were kind of scattered all over the place in different laws, which created a lot of confusion. Now there's one clear process for temporarily freezing everything from a bank account to a property deed during an investigation. And this is where that balance I mentioned really comes into play. In an urgent situation, like if there's a real risk that assets are about to disappear, investigators can act immediately. But they then have a super tight deadline, just 48 hours, to get a court to approve it. It's power, but with a built-in check. But what if you're just an innocent bystander and your assets get tangled up in someone else's investigation? Well, the new law introduces a specific protection for what it calls good faith third parties, making sure they have a legal way to challenge a seizure and get their property back. Another huge expansion of rights comes down to legal help. The old law only guaranteed a lawyer for suspects and defendants. The new KUHAP blows that wide open, extending that right to witnesses and victims too, at every single stage of the process. That's a massive change. And this isn't just symbolic. Lawyers now have the explicit right to be in the room with witnesses during questioning. They can object if they think an investigator is being intimidating, and, this part is critical, any objection they make has to be officially written down in the investigation report.
This is a huge step for transparency.
Okay, so after covering all of these sweeping changes, new deals for companies, new options for individuals, new powers for police, and new protections for everyone, we have to ask the big question. What happens now? What does the road ahead actually look like?
All right, so let's do a quick recap of the biggest takeaways. For corporations, there's the new off-ramp of deferred prosecution agreements. For individuals, there's now the option of plea bargaining. At the same time, law enforcement gets a single, clear framework to block assets, but that power is balanced by a major expansion of legal protections for everyone involved, especially the right to a lawyer. Look, this new law is a 40-year leap forward, no question. It's bringing some truly modern ideas into Indonesia's legal system. But as with any huge reform, the biggest question isn't what's written down on paper. It's how these changes are actually going to work in the real world, and how law enforcement will adapt to a completely new rulebook. And that's what everyone is going to be watching.